Good day everyone. For my second video, I'm about to discuss about the Transitivity at Work, a Feminist Stylistic Application by Deirdre Burton. So this reading is a famous feminist stylistic application of the model of transitivity, where Deirdre Burton uses the framework to explore the relationship of power in a passage from Sylvia Plath's semi-autobiographical novel, The Bell Jar. So Burton argues provocatively for a political dimension in textual interpretation and suggests that links between literary analysis and political standpoint can be articulated clearly through semantic and principled methods of analysis, precisely the sorts of methods that are offered by stylistics. So indeed, her study is a good example of the 3 R's at work because it is rigorous, its methods are retrievable, and its analysis can be replicated using different versions of the same analytic model. So although this type of process does not feature in the version of the model used by Burton, its absence is compensated for to some degree by an expanded interpretation of material processes. So this expanded category draws a primary distinction between event processes, so where the actor is inanimated as on the lake shimmered, and action processes which are performed by an animate actor. So an action processes may themselves be further subdivided into intention processes, where the actor performs the process of doing, voluntary and supervision processes, where the process of doing just happens. So thus, while a process like Mary kissed Claire is clearly material action intention, a process like the boy coughed loudly is arguably accidental and would therefore be coded as material action supervention. So through dark glasses on stylistic and political commitment, via study of a passage from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, the piece of prose fiction I am going to consider in some detail is a short passage from Sylvia Plath's autobiographical novel, The Bell Jar. So if the analyst is interested in making strange the power relationships that obtain in the socially constructed world, be it real world of public and private social relationships or the spoken and written text that we create, hear, read, and that ultimately construct us in that real world, then crucially, it is the realization of processes and participants, both the actors and the acted upon, in those processes that should concern us. So where the topic of women and literature is concerned, there are 3 immediate areas of thought and study that are being searched. So first, images of women in literature written by males, particularly in relation to details of social history. So this is of course work that draws upon and contributes to a new feminist version of that history. Second, images of women in literature written by feminist women. This will involve finding them in the first place. Third, images of women in literature by women who were not or are not feminists, either by free choice or because they were unaware that that choice was available to them. So Sylvia Plath's work and life can clearly be seen in relation to the third. So reading her prose, poems, and letters, and reading about her in the context of the race consciousness and women's support groups of the 1970s and 1980s is a moving and disturbing experience. It is so easy for us to locate her contradictions, dilemmas, and pressures as they are expressed by her text. It is so easy to see her writing herself into a concept of helpless victim and eventually perhaps into suicide itself. So her texts abound in disenabling metaphors, disenabling lexes, and disenabling syntactic structures. So my general message is stylistic analysis is just a question of discussing effects in language and text, but a powerful method for understanding the ways in which all sorts of realities are constructed through language. So for feminists who believe that the personal is political, there is a burning issue which has to be investigated immediately. So in various triangulated ways, we want to understand the relationships between severe and crippling depression that many women experience and the contradictory and disenabling images of self available for women in models of literature, the media, education, folk notions of the family, motherhood, daughterhood, work, and so on. So on reading the passage, readers repeatedly formulate the following sorts of responses. So the first is the persona seems quite helpless. The persona seems at a distance, outside herself, watching herself, detached to being with, and then just a victim. The medical staff seem more interested in getting the job than caring. So in order to understand something of what is happening in the language of this passage that gives rise to such responses, the following instructions enable us to get a firmer grasp of the persona's reality as constructed in the clause-by-clause makeup of the text as a whole. So isolate the process person and find which participant who or what's doing each process, find what sorts of process they are, and which participant is engaged in which type of process, then find who or what is affected by each of these processes. So it assumes students with an interest in literature in general, but little or no linguistic knowledge. Points 1 to 4 are I take it and continuous. Points 5 to 8 are offered as a program for radical stylistics. So first, stylistics can be part of a program to enable students to handle competently a coherent and comprehensive descriptive grammar, which can then be used in either literature-oriented studies or linguistic-oriented studies. So it is always at least a way into a text. It can shift discussion to awareness of effects that are intuitively felt to be in a text in the process of reading it, and a contingent making strange of those effects and feeling simultaneously it is towards knowing how as well as knowing that. So it can spell out a shared vocabulary for describing the language of any text, whether those effects are straightforward or ambiguous. Crucially, stylistics can point the way to understanding the ways in which the language of a given text constructs its own fictional reality, and it should then point the way towards understanding the ways in which language constructs the reality of everyday life, and an awareness that always must do so, so that in a sense everyday reality can usefully be seen as a series of fictional constructs, as text open to analysis and seen as a series of fictional constructs and interpretation in just the same way as text marked out for literary study are. So this would lead to an awareness of the importance of perceiving the constituent parts of the fictions we live in and by. So if only to map them against alternative constructions of reality. So finally, this would lead to an understanding that the fictions, both large and small, that we live in and by can be rewritten both individually and collectively as reform or revolution, whichever is more appropriate. So since Borton studies certain critical theories that suggested that feminism has given way to a so-called post-feminist era. So using the transitivity model, you could evaluate this claim by looking at other texts and by about other women. So that is all about my report about transitivity at work, a feminist stylistic appreciation of Deirdre Borton. So thank you for listening, everyone.